Doggone it. It's Patricia Aiken, the late average host of Sacred Cow Barbecue, and her exceptional guest. But my guest tonight is not a guest. We've made a new rule here at Sacred Cow Barbecue, and you may not know this, but if you've been a guest twice on the barbecue, you're now a co-host. So it's my pleasure to welcome legal analyst, Dr. Roger Roots. Hey, Roger, good evening to you.
Good evening to you.
Good.
I'm a co-host. Wow.
Co-host. That's right. So that means you can shut me up anytime you need to.
All right.
Hey, let's start this. I want to go over Ryan Bundy's detention hearing at length, but let's hit on a couple of the smaller things that's going on, or new things that's come up in the Bundy case. I think they're exceptional. The first one that I think his first name is Chris, but Pete Santilli's attorney Rasmussen believes the Dan Love situation. You got anything you want to say about that?
Well, let me just say the Nevada case down here is there's a lot going on, and motions are flying fast down here right now.
Yeah,
of course, trial begins for the first.
It's falling apart.
Well, let me just say there is a lot happening. There's the first trial begins with jury selection next Tuesday on the 6th, and just today there were at least 2 motions to dismiss the whole thing filed.
Woo! Who filed those?
I believe Ryan Payne filed one, and Stephen Stewart filed one. Stephen Stewart is one of the defendants in the first trial.
That's right. Steve Stewart's an awesome guy. Grocery store manager, supermarket manager.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but yesterday there were some major bombshell revelations that hit the Bundy world, so to speak.
Okay, spill them.
The Bundy, we could call it the Bundy sphere. Major revelations hit the Bundy sphere yesterday. A report by the, I believe it was the Inspector General or something of the BLM, or maybe the Department of Interior or otherwise, was made public yesterday about a supervising agent in Nevada and Utah who has been accused of some ethical violations, including getting special treatment for members of his family at the Burning Man Festival in northern Nevada, getting members of his family into special places, getting them basically driven around by the Burning Man Festival crowd. Also, there are revelations, or at least accusations, that particular agent manipulated some hiring decisions and had his friends hired improperly, perhaps.
Yeah, but we
anyway,
know if this is Dan Love, which we all suspect that it is. These accusations have actually come from within the BLM. There were loads of complaints filed against him before and after Bundy Ranch, before Blanding, Utah, and crazy. And it's just catching up with them. I think this is wonderful.
Well, let me just say, Dan Love, of course, was not named in that report. However, Deseret News just came out with a report today naming him as the supervising agent in question. Today, of course, those revelations hit the court filings of the Bundy case, because Dan Love, of course, was the supervising agent for the BLM during the cattle roundup in 2014, he was the lead BLM agent who was in charge of everything during that entire Bundy episode in April 2014.
Yeah, well, let's just call him what he really was, the lead sociopath.
Well, he's the lead agent and probably the star witness in this upcoming trial. Actually, all 3 of these upcoming trials.
Correct.
And here he is. And this is what makes it even remarkable. The discovery in the case, which all the lawyers have access to, doesn't even mention the fact that there's been this year-long investigation of Dan Love. All right, and so this is a discovery violation. Steve Stewart has moved to dismiss the entire indictment because, frankly, the government has covered this up and kept it hidden from the defense attorneys until yesterday. And yesterday they only found out about it because it was posted on the internet.
That's outrageous. And I think Rick Tanasi, Steve Stewart's attorney, has been a pretty decent, doing a pretty decent job for him. And so I'm happy. I'm happy. Not too bad.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Frankly, I haven't really watched Steve Stewart or his. I really don't know much about him. But
okay.
I'll tell you what. He filed a bombshell motion to dismiss just today, as of about an hour ago, based on these revelations regarding the BLM supervising agent in Utah and Nevada, who we all know was Dan Love.
Right.
And of course, again, the government has an obligation in these kinds of cases to provide that information to the defense lawyers. After all, it is impeaching information. It affects the credibility of a star witness in these upcoming trials.
They're withholding Brady. It's a Brady violation. It's exculpatory evidence.
Well, exactly. Anyway, and Ryan Payne's attorneys also filed a motion to dismiss along the same lines. And this is bombshell stuff. Frankly, I haven't the slightest idea what the judge is going to do with this stuff.
Okay, well,
probably
answer me this.
Starting tomorrow.
I don't mean to interrupt, but can you tell me something about this discovery situation? I was in the hearing back the second week in April when the magistrate, your friend Peggy Lean, told the government to get all their discovery to these defendants in 2 weeks. They had 2 weeks. They had 2 years to get all this together. And of course, Myrie got up there and hemmed and hawed, oh, well, we have, 700,000 pages and blah, blah, blah. Hey, listen, you've had 2 years, pal. And she told him to get it to him by the end of the month. Yet the last time I saw Steve Stewart at the beginning of December, it was around December 7th, 8th in there, he was still getting discovery.
Oh, there was a major package of discovery dropped off just last week. Just last week, the government was delivering major amounts of discovery. And you're absolutely right. I believe the magistrate judge, Peggy Lean, ordered the government to give all discovery, all the information it had about the case, to the defense lawyers by a date, I believe it was like May of last year.
No, it was April. It was the end of April. They had 2 weeks to get it to them, the end of April. Why hasn't there been a motion to dismiss based on the fact that the government has not provided the discovery in the time frame that the judge said?
Well, listen, also today, along those same lines, Cliven Bundy filed a motion in limine, which is a motion to exclude evidence before trial, relating to the Longbow Productions operation.
Good.
I'm sure you're aware that the FBI spent about a year, maybe more than a year, creating this very, very expensive undercover operation. They called it Longbow Productions. And it was a film crew, a fake FBI undercover film crew that had apparently a vast budget. And just today, Cliven Bundy's team filed a motion to exclude all of the interviews that the Longbow Productions operations generated. They were literally going around, these undercover FBI film crew agents were going around interviewing on camera all of these suspects, many of whom later became defendants in the Nevada case.
People like Greg Burleson that they liquored up first.
Well, he wasn't the only one, apparently.
Right.
Apparently, the first question they asked was, "Do you want something to drink?" And when the person coming in said, "Oh, sure, I'll have a 7-Up or a Coke or something," their first response was, "No, we mean alcohol. You want some whiskey? You want some Crown Royal?" They had everything. And of course, some of these guys had apparently Burleson had a drinking problem and a history of that, and they literally provided him with I don't know how many shots of whiskey.
I know, and he's bombastic sober. So I can't imagine the kind of footage they must have got from him with some drinks in him. Yeah,
frankly, it was Burleson's lawyer who has led the charge from the beginning to exclude Burleson's interviews on the grounds that he was coerced, tricked, lied to, and it was an undercover FBI operation doing the interviewing.
Hey, wait. The judges said, well, that's fair. That's okay. That's perfectly normal for the FBI to do that.
The magistrate, I believe, Lean, again, upheld it, said it was okay. Burleson volunteered for the interview. Anyway, Clive Bundy just filed today a motion to exclude all of the interviews that were done by Longbow Productions, every single interview.
Well, you know, Roger, you're not the most optimistic attorney that I've ever met in this case, yet you're optimistic.
Well, I can tell you that these are some bombshell filings. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what judges are going to do with these kinds of motions, frankly.
And there was another situation, and I don't know if you want to talk about it tonight. Maybe that hasn't come out yet. So there was some other things about Longbow Productions, and I can ask you later if you want. So, but that is those are two huge as Mr. Trump would say, developments.
Yeah.
Huge. And so when are those motions set to be heard?
Well, it's not clear, frankly. Now, keep in mind, Clive Bundy is scheduled for the second trial.
Correct.
Which he doesn't even have a date. Basically, it's sometime in the indefinite future.
Right. It'll be a month after the first trial is ended.
Yeah, at least 30 days after the end of the first trial. And the first trial begins with jury selection this coming Tuesday on the 6th of February.
Well, that's the 7th, but Monday. So the jury selection is going to start on the 6th in the trial.
I believe so.
Yeah, because the 7th is what they had said. So, but the 7th is a Tuesday. I know that because I'm slated for trial on the 7th as well. So.
Okay, well, I believe on the 6th, jury selection begins in the first Bundy trial. And, of course, no Bundy is actually in that trial, but it's called the first Bundy trial.
Right.
Well, you asked when the court might rule on these motions. Frankly, I don't know because, like I said, these Cliven's trial is not scheduled until sometime, I guess, at a minimum, it would be March or April.
Yeah.
So, although I believe his team filed that with the understanding that they were trying to get it to apply both to all the trials, including the first one. Also today, let me just say, Cliven filed a response to the government's motion in limine that was filed last week. Last week, the government filed this really, I think, overreaching motion in limine to exclude any discussion of the militarization of the BLM or any discussion of the fact that the BLM was being heavy-handed.
That was the most disgusting in limine I've ever seen.
Yeah, and by the way, the guys in the first trial did file a pretty good response to that, and just today, Cliven also filed a very good response to that. But keep in mind that one of the accusations in this indictment is an accusation of assaulting federal officers. All right, an assault claim is an ancient claim. It's an allegation that, I mean, that kind of a claim has been made for hundreds of years, and there has always been the availability of a defense, of self-defense, and wrapped up in self-defense is the idea that you get to inform the jury how big and strong and scary and heavily armed the so-called victim was. All right, so this is an ancient defense, the militarization of the BLM, and yet the government is trying to convict these guys of assaulting federal officers while telling the jury, I guess hiding from the jury, all the evidence of how big and powerful and heavily armed and militarized the BLM was.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing but the one other thing that came out today or this week, and that was something that Count 3 got dismissed, that Comrade Navarro finally dismissed that So
that just happened today.
Just happened today. I was happy to see that because because
you
made a comment about that. Wait a minute, how is it the Ninth Circuit in Oregon dismissed that, and the Ninth Circuit here in Nevada refuses to? They're both in the Ninth Circuit, right?
Yeah, count 3 was actually identical in Nevada, identical to the indictment in Oregon against Ammon Bundy and Ryan Bundy and those guys. Identical. Count 3 was identical. The judge up in Oregon, who was certainly no friend of the defendants, looked at it. I'll just, for the listeners, count 3 was an accusation of using a firearm in a crime of violence. The crime of violence being a charge called conspiracy to impede federal officers. All right. Now, anyone who thinks that conspiracy to impede federal officers is a crime of violence, the fact is, I suppose it could be, but it's one of those accusations that is so confusing and ambiguous that you certainly can impede federal officers without using violence.
Yeah.
And I think that's just obvious.
Void for vagueness.
Yeah, and actually the magistrate had initially recommended that count stay, that it not be dismissed. But just today, U.S. District Judge Navarro dismissed count 3, just as the judge in Oregon dismissed count 3.
Right. Well, here's my question about that, because I remember Juror 4 in Oregon saying that the whole jury was blown away when Comrade Brown said there's no such thing as impeding federal officers. They said they were shocked that she admitted that. So,
I just don't remember that.
Yeah, there was so much going on, but I remember that clearly. Juror 4 saying that they were just sitting there, they were like stunned, and that really resonated with them. So I thought.
Well, keep in mind, the accusation of conspiracy to impede. If you really look at that statute, the word impede is only in the title. The actual text of the statute says something like, anyone who conspires with another person to prevent a government officer from doing his duties shall be found guilty, and it's up to 6 years in prison, I believe. And that, by the way, is still count 2. Count 2 is still on the indictment, and that is conspiracy to impede federal officers. They just today got rid of count 3, which is using a gun to conspire to impede federal officers.
It seems to me on these indictments, especially in the Nevada case, Roger, that they've just reworded them 3 or 4 different times and stacked them all together. I know you've said to me on other occasions that it's the most evil indictment you've ever seen.
It is. I've never seen anything like it. It was put together by an absolute madman. Pure wicked. It's pure wickedness and evil.
I know it's this is Team Harry Reid going against them. So let's before we run out of time, I thought Ryan Bundy did the most amazing job of standing up to every single charge that the government had leveled against him, made up against him for being a danger to the community. He demolished them, Roger, didn't you think?
I certainly think so, yes. That hearing was a hearing on detention. Keep in mind that most of the listeners are probably aware. All 3 of your listeners, Patricia, are probably aware. I'm kidding.
No, wait. There's 4 in the chat room right now. Don't leave anybody out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you have to rule out the FBI, listeners who are paid to listen.
Okay, then we're down to 2. All right, you're right.
But in any case, this is a great radio show. But in any case, all of the defendants, I'm sure all the listeners are aware, all the defendants are still in custody. And this is an outrage.
373 days today.
It's an outrage. It's so unusual, even in federal court. And of course, federal court is so brutal and so cruel. But even in these federal criminal cases, it is unusual that this many people be in custody, held without bail, in a case that's not even that outrageous. Remember that this case does not involve a single injury, not one injury.
No,
Not a killing, not a stabbing, not a shooting. I mean, I talked to Chris Rasmussen.
No, wait, your friend Shauna Cox, she did sprain her ankle.
I don't know about that, but that was in this case.
Yeah.
But let me just say, I talked to Rasmussen. He's the attorney for Pete Santilli. He had been in the big Hells Angels conspiracy case, maybe 10 years ago or so. And that was a case involving multiple Hells Angels. There was a motorcycle war between the Banditos and maybe the Outlaws and the Hells Angels. Anyway, there were 6 dead bodies, murder investigations, and they all those defendants, the Hells Angels defendants, were released on their own recognizance and able to defend themselves from outside. And in this case, the Bundy case, every single defendant remains in custody, held without bail, and it's now a year into it.
Yeah, well, and Roger, one thing that you said to me that you think it's very sad that Ryan Bundy is the only one that's had his detention hearing reopened.
Yeah, all the lawyers just gave up, practically. I mean, they just all gave up. I mean, they had some initial 20-minute little hearings way back when they were first arraigned, and they filed a motion for pretrial release, which was denied without much of a hearing.
No.
Ryan Bundy's team, of course, Ryan is pro se, and he has been the only guy who has drafted up all kinds of efforts to get the magistrate to give him a real hearing on the question of bail or detention.
And it was brilliant.
Yeah, finally managed to get a hearing 2 days ago on Tuesday. And, of course, he was the main witness, Ryan himself. The U.S. attorney basically literally took him through every possible permutation in order to make him look bad, make him look dangerous or threatening.
And use up his time.
Yeah, he used up all of Ryan's time. And Ryan had other witnesses that he had to get on. But the U.S. attorney spent probably 2 or 3 hours grilling Ryan Bundy. And it was obvious to me and anyone in the audience that Myrie, the U.S. attorney, was using that opportunity to question Ryan about things about the case that were far beyond the scope of a detention hearing. Trying to get Ryan. Yeah.
Ryan stood up to him and said, "What has this got to do with me being a danger to the community or a flight risk? That's what this hearing is about." And then Foley would allow it. Well, I'm going to allow it because otherwise I'm going to lose my job if I don't. But Myrie came off like a schoolyard bully.
That's what I thought. There were some of the questioning by Myrie was, for people who weren't there, it was the kind of questioning that you just said the word bully. I couldn't have put it any better. It was okay, Mr. Bundy, so what did your father say about the court order? And Ryan Bundy's response, well, he said a lot of things. Well, what did he say on the stage there? Oh. And of course, Ryan Bundy said, well, my father said a lot of things. Oh, you don't want to answer? Let's play the video. So they play the video. And then he asked Ryan Bundy, okay, Mr. Bundy, so what did he say? And again, he said a lot of things.
I know. Yeah, it was ridiculous. He was badgering the witness. In any other courtroom, if it wasn't the feds doing it, the judge would have put a stop to it immediately.
Yeah, it was just that kind of you used the word bullying. It was that kind of an interrogation. And frankly, I don't think it really went very far. I don't think he scored many points. I think Ryan Bundy responded very, very well. Nothing's perfect, of course.
Yeah.
But he was very, very good on his feet.
Yeah, he's been to the Lysander Spooner University School of Law in Oregon.
Right on.
Yeah, and it shows. Well, you have to say he was pro se in the last trial in Oregon, and he has upped his game. No doubt about it.
Yep.
I'm so proud of him. But what I noticed, I don't know, I'm always watching everybody. I thought the magistrate was really paying attention was when Ryan was talking. And then he looked incredibly bored when Myrie was going after him. And then he finally, eventually, and you wrote me a note right at the time. You said the judge is about ready to shut this down. And sure enough, it wasn't one or two sentences later when the judge interrupted and shut it down. And I said,
Yeah.
how did you know that? What said that to you?
Well, I don't know. Listen, Myrie was just going around in circles, asking the same question over and over. So what did your father say? And when Ryan Bundy would try to answer, he'd say, "Oh, you don't want to answer?" I mean, it was just an absolute. It's the way an adult talks to a small child. It was very condescending, and I don't know if Myrie is that way in front of the jury. I hesitate to say that. I just can't imagine a jury really responding well to that.
No, they're not going to warm up to him. And I couldn't believe it. They had 6 attorneys sitting there from the DOJ, 3 at the table and 3 behind. They had Myrie and then the young kids. They all look like kids. Of course, I'm old now, so everybody looks like a kid. So Ryan's there, and he's like the howitzer in the 6 water pistols next to him. But they had nothing. Nothing.
Well, also, I believe Myrie is the actual United States attorney for the U.S. District of Nevada. It's very unusual, by the way, for the actual U.S. attorney for a U.S. court district to do the examination in a bail hearing. This is absolutely almost unheard of. It never happens.
Oh my God! Well, I hope he's got his retirement up to speed, because he could be facing retirement if he loses this case.
Well, he's obviously one of the more seasoned attorneys in the
obviously
Justice Department.
They're used to. They're obviously more used to paper trial. Oops! I got to take my medicine. They're more used to a paper war, because he is not a good speaker.
Well, frankly, almost all lawyers are used to paper litigation nowadays, just because trials are almost vanishing. Almost nobody goes to trial anymore. I don't know if you've seen those statistics, but well over 90% of all criminal defendants now plead guilty. And, of course, the remaining, 10% of those, the vast majority are found guilty. The rules of evidence so far are so in favor of the government. The rules of procedure have been changed over time to favor the government. It's really sad what has happened to the criminal justice system.
Well, your book sums that up really well, Roger. And anybody that hasn't read it, I highly recommend that you get your hands on a copy of The Conviction Factory, because it was a riveting, heartbreaking, but riveting read. And I highly recommend it to everyone. So, Roger, what did you make of, at one point, Myrie saying, "Did you go up to that sale barn to get the cattle? Were you going to go get the cattle? Was that what you..." And he kept asking. And so Ryan says, "Well, I was in the family van. I can't fit a lot of cattle in the van."
Yeah, the audience sort of cracked up a little bit.
Yeah, we couldn't help it. Everybody laughed. It was just funny. And then the judge jumped on us and said, "Any further outbursts?" You can't help laughing when something's funny. He said it's not like we're talking or making, or booing or something like that. It's not voluntary. I don't understand why he jumped on us so hard.
Well, it happens.
Yeah,
a lot of these judges try to maintain some order in their courtrooms.
Yeah. Well, one of the best witnesses, I thought, was Mark McEwen, the former Metro officer, the retired Metro officer. Why don't you tell folks how you felt about that?
Well, frankly, if you read the indictment, you would be absolutely unaware of the fact, because it accuses Ryan Bundy of all these crimes and participating in assaults on federal officers, threatening federal officers, extortion, using firearms to terrorize federal officers. Well, you'd be forgiven if you didn't know that, in fact, Ryan Bundy was in the company of a Clark County deputy the entire time. And this fact, to me, is just astounding, that he's accused of doing all of these criminal acts, while it came out at the hearing that, in fact, a Clark County deputy was right next to him for most of the entire time.
Yeah, and was driving him around.
Was driving him around. Ryan Bundy was actually using the Clark County sheriff's equipment. He was using the Clark County, the speaker horn to speak to the crowd. This is astounding that the government is accusing these guys of criminal acts, while in fact the sheriffs and the deputies were right there. Right next to them. Same thing with Ammon Bundy. Same thing with Dave Bundy.
Yeah.
Literally, there were sheriff deputies right next to them the entire time.
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing, and it looks like, because there was all kinds of I don't know what you want to call it, just sniping going on between the BLM and Metro after the stand, saying, well, it's your fault that went bad. No, it was your fault. And it seems like Metro's almost willing to throw the BLM under the bus at this point.
Well, we'll see. Who knows what's going to happen at trial, but certainly the Metro, which is, of course, a combination of Las Vegas, they call it Las Vegas Metro. Yeah. A lot of people do not understand how Las Vegas police could be having any jurisdiction out there 100 miles away in Bunkerville. But it's an agreement that the Clark County Sheriff's Department has made with the City of Las Vegas Police Department, and they sort of have a combined Metro force, I guess.
Right, the sheriffs and the police. It's a really strange system here. I've never lived in another city like this.
I agree. No, I haven't either. It's very strange. Usually in a rural place, you have these deputies which belong to the county, and in the cities, there's a city police force. Well, in Las Vegas and the entire county of Clark County, they're combined. And so way out 100 miles away from Vegas, there'll be Las Vegas Metro police officers. But, I'm sure there's, at these trials, it will come out that there are, let's just say there wasn't lockstep agreement between the federal and state agencies, and I think that's going to come out in these trials.
Well, what about the show right after the standoff where Joe Lombardo, who was the assistant sheriff then, who's now the sheriff in Clark County, what he said something like, well, nobody was arrested because there was nothing unlawful going on. Isn't that what he said? Something to that effect?
I believe so. And I think McEwen said something to the same effect.
Right.
He was asked by Ryan Bundy, did you see any crimes? And he said, no, I saw no crimes. I believe at Cross, though, Myrie asked him, well, isn't the release of the cattle, didn't you think that might be a crime? And I think he responded something like, well, I guess maybe that might have been a crime of some kind.
Well, course, I don't know. How can they get that? Because, see, to me, Sheriff Gillespie had already announced on the stage that the BLM had already issued a press release that they were ceasing operations. That was done before anybody went anywhere to get the cattle.
Yeah, that's my understanding of the evidence. The evidence is going to show that, in fact, a BLM announcement had gone out early that morning, early that morning.
Actually, the night before that they had said it.
Yes, the night before, but it had gone as an announcement, even a published announcement that morning. And many people, I believe, were actually surprised when they arrived at the location and they found that, in fact, the BLM was not leaving. The BLM was not, ceasing operations, but in fact was fully engaged guns drawn and the whole bit.
And had been shredding evidence all night, shredding documents. Whatever, if it was evidence or not, but they've been running their paper shredders all night. What were they shredding?
Well, that was the focus of one motion filed by Ammon Bundy's attorneys. And I believe it was the court did not find, I don't think that was really dug into that deeply, frankly.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to know that. So what do you think Ryan Bundy's chances are of getting released pre-trial?
I hate to give a percentage figure, frankly. I'll just say going into it in the early morning, I didn't think he had much of a chance. But by the time we got to the noon hour, frankly, I had changed my mind. I think I'm very optimistic. I think he has a legitimate chance of being released any day now.
Yeah, I thought he did a phenomenal job. And if there's any justice, and I'm not saying there is, I feel like he's going to be out, and that's going to start an avalanche of everybody else wanting to get out. And you know what? The damage has been done to their families. Why not let them out?
And to their cases.
You've had
they have not been able to defend themselves.
Yeah. You've had your sadistic fun. Let them out now so they can get ready for trial.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to that Lombardo interview. Rory Reid was on that same show. That's Harry Reid's son. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Maybe you should get him on your show.
Yeah, maybe I should. Yeah, maybe I should. Speaking of my show, you're listening to Sacred Cow Barbecue on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We are listener and volunteer supported. So we appreciate all the people that support the station, and we want to encourage everyone else to run over, get the archives, buy some of the cool stuff. Hey, it's going to be spring soon. Get those seed packets. Every little bit helps around here. It doesn't take a lot to keep us on the air. Right now, here it is, the beginning of the month. It is February 2nd. And of our $2,800 goal, we've raised 75 big ones. So thank you to thank you to everyone that keeps things going on right around here. And I want to thank Free Spirit Energy for supporting Sacred Cow Barbecue too. Be sure you go visit them, freespiritenergy.com. If you're a camper, some hunters, somebody that, out there that likes to be off-grid, this can keep your batteries topped off. It's a great little wind generator. It's very, very cool. So check them out at freespiritenergy.com. So, Roger, what else? I thought this was a great dress rehearsal, Ryan's hearing the other day. Really gave you an insight on how the government's thinking.
Well, it's funny. The government is focusing on several things. Obviously, Myrie kept asking about Cliven's statements. I mean, he was Ryan's hearing, but he kept asking about Cliven's speech that he gave on the stage there. Obviously, the government thinks that's a huge deal, and I think that's a major focus of where the government thinks its case lies.
Yeah, 70-year-old ranch is a real threat to him.
Well, all I can say is these trials are going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. There's a lot I can't really go into. Obviously, in full disclosure, I'm working with both the Ryan Bundy legal team and the Cliven Bundy legal team, and so I just need to throw that out. There's a lot I can't really discuss.
You didn't need to give any disclosure on that. I just had you on as an analyst tonight. Here, you're blowing your own cover now. Okay, no, don't blame me. Don't blame me. So, no, here's one thing. Just, I've known Ryan since the week after the standoff, and I spent a lot of time with him, me and another friend, and we made a great videotape, and he put it out in sections and stuff. And so I know with one of the websites, the UK websites, actually picked it up. Last winter, we were glad to see people picking up that video again. But the thing that always gets me is when he puts Angie, his wife, on the stand. I come unglued.
Well, there was not a dry eye in the building.
Exactly.
Not a dry eye.
It's absolutely incredible what she says about him. When she said, I realized then that I married up, I was like, oh my gosh, what an amazing thing to say. I thought she did amazing. He was a little more composed this time than the last time, but it was, it's absolutely incredible, the stories that she told about him. And, what a remarkable person. He's a fighter, but he is a highly principled person and kind and compassionate. And to say that he's a danger to the community is the most outrageous thing. So I'm so happy to see him fighting this. And I hope, what do you think the chances are on a dismissal at this point?
Well, keep in mind there have been a lot of motions to dismiss already filed.
Right.
That have been denied on various grounds.
Yeah, the ground is that Harry Reid won't allow it.
Well, it's the court. The judges have denied every single motion to dismiss thus far until today. Just today, for the first time, the judge granted the motion to dismiss count 3. So who knows? Frankly, it's always an uphill battle trying to get rid of criminal charges before trial. If I had to gamble, I would say that these cases are the remaining counts are more than likely going to trial. As to what is going to happen with the Dan Love revelations and the Longbow production revelations, who knows? There might be some court rulings in the very near future, stopping some of those from being introduced.
Oh, come on. You know what? That's what happened in Oregon. These men were not allowed to put on a defense, and yet that was telling to the jury at that point. When they couldn't bring up the Constitution, the jurors were like, how come? Why not? It put a lot of questions in the jury's mind. I think, they can't be too, the government's between a rock and a hard place here. They don't have a case.
Yep.
Yeah.
All I can say is people should be on the edge of their seats in these trials coming up. And in the trial, the remaining Oregon trial, there's 4 big trials.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if you're watching this stuff, some of the most interesting cases I've ever seen.
Roger, I want you to talk, if you would, for a minute. You have put the fear of God in me when you told me about sentencing for acquitted conduct. Would you say how that applies to these misdemeanor charges in Oregon?
Well, it's been a very vile, despicable, wicked practice by federal judges for years, where they'll have a multi-count indictment, and a jury will come back acquitting the defendants of most of the counts, and then convicting the defendants of 1 or 2 or 3 counts. And then it's been very insidious for many years in many courts. Many judges then at sentencing will then get to sentence the defendant for the counts that he was convicted of, and they'll say, well, it happens a lot in drug cases, frankly, where for example, I'll just give a hypothetical example. The jury will acquit the defendant of conspiracy to traffic cocaine and trafficking cocaine, but they'll convict him of mere possession of cocaine. Okay? So then he goes to be sentenced for the mere possession of cocaine, and the judge at sentencing will sort of, they have this idea that they get to take a broad look of the defendant and his lifestyle and his behavior and conduct, and then in the purview of that analysis for sentencing purposes, then the judge will conceptually reconvict the defendant of the counts that the jury just found him not guilty of. And it's an insidious practice. It's gone up on appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court in different ways. Actually, that was one of the reasons that the Supreme Court, maybe 10 years back, struck down the sentencing guidelines and made them only, instead of mandatory, they're now sort of just guidelines because of the practice of judges sentencing defendants for acquitted conduct. Well,
that brings up an interesting point, because now people argue that the government was forced to put the Hammonds back in jail to finish out their sentence. And I think that's BS. And I can say BS on Sacred Cow Barbecue.
Yeah. Very, very unusual.
It's still double jeopardy.
Yeah. Well, what's so horrible in the Hammond case is that the Hammonds had already served their sentences and were out. And then, while there was an appeal going up being heard by the Ninth Circuit, and then, months and months and months later, maybe even a year later, the Ninth Circuit overrules the lower court and says, no, these guys are subject to a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence. And so then the Hammonds both have to go back to prison after they've already served their sentence. Very.
They were railroaded the first time.
Yeah.
And Amanda Marshall, I'd like to know what's going on in that office romance drama up there. That was a really funny situation. My friend Jim Cole was waiting. His attorney in Boston was waiting on the sentencing brief, and that's just a travesty what went on in his case. I mean, oh my, talk about the federal buzzsaw. And so he called the attorney in Portland, the government's attorney, said, oh, I hear there's some hanky-panky going on up there. And she said, yes, I know. It's my husband.
Wow.
Small world.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a place. Well,
I don't think I've ever finished the question with regard to this misdemeanors up in Oregon.
I got too excited. Go ahead.
For the listeners who aren't aware, last week...
All three of them.
Yeah, there's 3 misdemeanors that have been added on to the defendants who are facing the second Oregon trial. Remember, the first Oregon trial ended in October with not guilty verdicts by the jury. Okay, well, the second group of guys, about 6 guys, Dwayne Emmer is one, Jason Patrick, Sean Anderson, Sandy Anderson,
Ryan.
Who am I forgetting?
Ryan.
Jake Ryan. Daryl Thorne is in that list also.
Right.
Anyway, they are going on trial, I believe, beginning on the 14th with jury selection, February 14th. Second trial, same charges. And again, those charges are conspiracy to impede federal officers, and I think a couple of them are charged with possession of firearm in federal facilities, perhaps. Maybe Jake Ryan is also charged with damaging federal property with an excavator by digging a hole, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think maybe Dwayne Emmer might also be charged with that. But in any case, just going into this in the last month or so, the feds, the prosecutors, added 3 misdemeanor counts to that trial. Trespassing, the other 2 counts, I'm not sure exactly what they were called, but they relate to just starting up equipment, starting up an excavator, and maybe driving it around or whatever.
Ooh,
anyway,
ooh.
Yeah, minor misdemeanor accusations. Keep in mind, these guys have major defenses to this stuff. They certainly have defenses to the trespassing allegation because in their interpretation of the law, which of course is the same, I believe, as Ammon Bundy's interpretation, they weren't even trespassing.
Yeah, well, the fact that how can you be trespassing when you've been given the keys and the place has been, left wide open? There's no trespass then.
Well, the guys in the first trial had actually different defenses. They didn't all have the same defense. Ammon Bundy was actually engaged in something called adverse possession, where he actually was trying to deliberately sort of retake the land and the ground for the county or the state of Oregon. And so that was, but not all of them, I think, were fully, let's say, engaged in that. most of them were just, if you ask them, they say they were engaged in just a protest or just a demonstration. That was their main purpose. They certainly were not there to impede federal officials from doing their duties. They're completely innocent of that accusation.
Right. I love Jeff Banta's defense, saying, well, I thought it was all lawful because I figured they'd have nipped it in the bud and arrested him a long time ago, but it was 40 days into it. So I thought everything was cool.
Yeah.
That was a great defense.
Yep. Well, they're certainly not guilty of the charge of conspiring to prevent government officials from performing their duties. Most of those guys couldn't care less, frankly, about the government officials. That wasn't even a part of their thinking when they went into that. They were, again, I'm not going to say they were all in lockstep agreement with each other, but they certainly were not guilty of the crime of conspiring to prevent federal workers from doing their jobs. The government is so desperate for convictions, though, that they've added those misdemeanor counts, hoping that they can get the jury to at least convict on those misdemeanor counts. And they've also enlisted the judge. The judge has virtually taken over the misdemeanor counts and has announced that the jury will not get to consider them. The judge will decide whether or not they are guilty of trespassing or turning on the excavator or running the skid steer or whatever.
Well,
this is outrageous to me.
Well, see, that's why I think that she's angling for sentencing for acquitted conduct.
Well, if they are convicted, and it seems, frankly, the judge is almost telegraphing.
Yeah.
This is what's so outrageous. The judge has almost telegraphed that she's going to find them guilty of the misdemeanors, and then what will happen at sentencing? Frankly, I don't know, but I fear that maybe the judge is thinking, well, at sentencing, I will impose some restitution order, in the nature of the millions of dollars that the government is claiming. The government all along has had these press conferences in which they announced ridiculously that, these guys caused all this damage, millions of dollars of damage.
$6 million, $6,600,000, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So it couldn't be that evil. It can't be that evil, but maybe, who knows? The judge maybe in her mind is thinking, well, I'm just going to convict these guys of trespassing and then at sentencing, saddle them with $6 million of restitution.
Yeah.
I just cannot imagine that could happen.
I know but it's Bolshevik America. It's their Marxist agenda. So anything's possible. I'm more concerned for the Oregon defendants this round than I am for the Nevada defendants this round. I'm very concerned with the judge doing that. And I think are they filing any motions against that? Are they? That's the thing. I mean, they've got to do something here. But
the lawyers filed a pretty good statement. Frankly, the judge's ruling was preposterous.
Yeah.
If you read it, it was preposterous. The judge actually was saying something like, "The case law is not well settled on this area," and to the extent that there is any settled case law, it's from way back when the case law was much different.
Yeah. Right. With the Magna Carta, it doesn't apply here anymore. Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
Roger, you're going to have to come back more often. I'm sorry if I interrupted you. But you're the co-host now, so it's up to you to control me. So, up to you.
Well,
this didn't go well. It's your fault. So.
Well, how much more time do we have?
About a minute before the music starts. So go ahead. Take us out to the music.
You said you were concerned about the outcome in the second Oregon trial. Frankly, the guys in Nevada are looking at a lot more time than the Oregon defendants. I've got my fingers crossed. I really do believe that we're going to have very good outcomes in all these 4 trials. I really believe that. And by that, and when I say we, I mean the American people are going to have some good outcomes I believe we're going to win all 4 of these trials. I really do.
That's right. Well, Ammon Bundy was promised. He felt that very strongly, that this would change things. So, Dr. Roger Roots, thank you so much. Get a copy of The Conviction
Thank you,
Factor.
Patricia.